The marble floors of Kincaid Medical Center gleamed beneath the soft light of dawn, each polished tile reflecting the image of a man who had conquered every market but could not conquer fate. Adrian Kincaid adjusted his charcoal suit for the third time, the motion precise, habitual, almost desperate. His eyes, cold steel in the glass walls of his empire, followed the uneven steps of his 7-year-old son as the boy maneuvered across the hall with a pair of crutches that clacked like echoes of failure. Noah's determination was pure fire, small hands gripping the handles with a courage that made Adrian's throat tighten. Each step was a victory carved from pain, but every sound of metal against stone felt like a verdict. The irony bit deep. He owned the most advanced private medical network on the East Coast, a cathedral of science and precision, yet his own son's legs remained bound by a mystery no surgeon could solve. Ava Chen, his assistant, approached with a tablet pressed to her chest, her voice lowered to a reverent whisper. "Mr. Kincaid, the Zurich investors are waiting in conference room A." Adrian barely nodded, his gaze fixed on Noah, who paused near the wall, breathing hard but smiling anyway, as if defiance could replace healing. "Tell them 5 minutes." Dr. Bennett Rowan appeared at the end of the corridor, clipboard in hand, expression already shadowed by futility. The latest scans showed no change. The Swiss treatment, the Harvard consultations, the endless cascade of cutting-edge protocols. Each had promised light. Each had delivered more darkness. Adrian clenched his fists. 3 years of seeking miracles, 3 years of empty guarantees. And still his boy carried the weight of broken motion. Noah turned, his grin bright as sunrise. "Dad, can we go to that diner again? The one with the grilled cheese that melts just right." Adrian's heart softened. "Of course, champ. Anything you want." He lifted the boy effortlessly, the crutches swinging like silent witnesses. And for a fleeting instant, the power of love eclipsed the power of money. 20 minutes later, the roar of traffic gave way to the quiet hum of Juniper Diner, a modest haven tucked between glass towers and ambition. The scent of butter and coffee filled the air, grounding him in a world unmeasured by profit margins. Adrian felt overdressed amid vinyl booths and checkered floors, yet Noah's delight washed away every trace of discomfort. "Welcome back to Juniper's." The voice was warm honey, steady, assured. Adrian looked up from his phone and met the gaze of a young woman with eyes the color of deep moss after rain. Lila Monroe, her name tag said waitress, but her posture spoke another language. Shoulders square, movements deliberate, a quiet precision that belonged in operating rooms, not between salt shakers. "You must be Noah," she said, crouching so her eyes aligned with the boy's. "I hear you're the city's top grilled cheese critic." Noah laughed, proud. "Dad says I'm a professional." "Then we'll make sure today's sandwich meets expert standards," she replied, her tone playful yet exact, as if measuring more than appetite. Adrian watched her walk away, noticing the symmetry of her steps, the economical grace that betrayed training. When she returned with menus, Noah struggled with a packet of crackers, his fingers rebelling against fine control. Without hesitation, Lila sat beside him. "May I show you something?" She guided his hands, shifted the angle, engaged a muscle group no one had mentioned before. The packet opened smoothly. Adrian froze, engaged the thumb muscle group. That was not diner vocabulary. His instincts sharpened. "You seem to know a lot about motor coordination for someone in hospitality." Lila's smile flickered like a shuttered candle before settling into composure. "Let's just say I've had experience with challenges like Noah's." As she left to place their order, Adrian's mind spun. Years of negotiations had taught him to read people, and this woman carried secrets in every measured motion. Across the room, she adjusted a tray's weight with the precision of a surgeon balancing instruments. Something about her presence hummed with possibility, an undercurrent he could neither explain nor ignore. Noah leaned across the table, whispering with absolute trust. "Dad, she helped me better than the doctors. Maybe her hands are magic." Adrian looked at the boy, then at the woman behind the counter wiping a surface with methodical care. For the first time in years, a sliver of unfamiliar hope pressed against the walls of his guarded heart. Outside, sirens wailed along the boulevard, the sound fading into the distance like an omen. Inside, the quiet clatter of dishes formed a fragile rhythm, syncing with the beat of a father's restless faith. Adrian did not yet know that within this modest diner lay the key to the miracle no fortune could buy. A miracle born not of machines or money, but of hands that refused to give up. Steam curled above plates as sunlight filtered through the wide front windows of Juniper Diner, casting gold across the checkered floor. The morning crowd hummed softly, an orchestra of clinking cups and murmured orders. Adrian Kincaid sat across from his son in a corner booth by the window, still thinking about the way the waitress had adjusted Noah's grip so naturally, like someone who had spent years guiding fragile movements back to life. Lila Monroe returned with their drinks, placing each glass in front of them with precise symmetry. Her motions were fluid, unhurried, almost rehearsed. When she turned, Adrian caught the faint marks on her hands, not the calluses of a waitress, but the faint impressions left by years of handling instruments, braces, and therapy tools. She caught his gaze and smiled, polite but distant, a wall built from experience. Noah chatted happily, swinging his legs against the booth. Lila listened, kneeling slightly to match his height. "You're getting stronger every day, aren't you, Noah?" The boy grinned. "I practice a lot. Dad says I'm tougher than I look." "I believe him," she said softly. "Strength isn't just in muscles. It's in choosing to stand when it would be easier to sit." Adrian studied her carefully. Few people spoke to Noah without pity or forced optimism. This woman offered neither. Her words carried understanding, not consolation. When their food arrived, Noah struggled with his fork, trying to balance a piece of sandwich. Lila reached out again, her fingertips resting lightly on his hand. "Try shifting your wrist just a little. There. Now let your shoulder do the work." The motion smoothed instantly. Noah's face lit up. "It's easier now." Adrian felt a tremor of recognition. He had seen countless therapists attempt to correct Noah's coordination, always armed with charts and jargon, never with intuition like this. Lila's insight came from memory, not manuals. "Who taught you that?" he asked. Her eyes flicked toward him, calm yet guarded. "Life has a way of teaching us what we need to know." She straightened, retreating before he could press further. They ate in companionable quiet. Outside, the city pulsed with restless ambition, but inside the diner time slowed, anchored by the small triumph of a boy lifting his sandwich without strain. Adrian's phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it, watching Noah instead. For the first time in months, his son was laughing without effort, the sound ringing like a promise. When Lila returned with the check, Noah looked up eagerly. "Can you eat with us next time? Maybe you can teach me more tricks." She hesitated, eyes softening. "If your father doesn't mind, I suppose I could." Adrian surprised himself by nodding. He wanted to understand the mystery before him. This woman whose presence seemed to stir both hope and unease. As they rose to leave, Noah struggled to balance his crutches. Lila knelt beside him, adjusting the height slightly. The handles were worn smooth from use, but her touch transformed them into tools of progress rather than burden. Every object she touched seemed to carry purpose. Outside the diner, the autumn air was crisp, leaves scattering across the pavement like amber confetti. Adrian held the door for his son, then turned back for one last look. Lila stood behind the counter, wiping a glass with deliberate motions, her eyes distant, her expression unreadable. Something inside him whispered that this encounter was not coincidence. In the car, Noah chattered non-stop about his new friend, recounting every word she'd said. Adrian listened, half present, half lost in thought. He had spent fortunes on specialists who offered hope in sterile rooms. Yet a woman in a simple black uniform had achieved more in a single meal than years of medical interventions. As they merged into traffic, the city skyline shimmered in the morning light, tall and invincible. But beneath the glass towers, destiny was already shifting. Adrian's certainty in science alone was cracking, replaced by a fragile faith in something less measurable: human connection, intuition, the quiet brilliance hidden in ordinary places. He glanced at his son in the rearview mirror, the boy humming softly, fingers flexing with newfound control. Maybe miracles did not wear white coats or carry degrees. Maybe they walked among strangers, carrying secrets and scars, waiting for a chance to heal what others could not. Back at Kincaid Tower, investors and advisors would be waiting, hungry for numbers and assurances. Yet Adrian's mind lingered in the diner, replaying the gentle precision of Lila's hands. There had been knowledge there, not guessed but earned, the kind that comes through sacrifice. He parked the car and lifted Noah carefully, feeling the weight of both hope and uncertainty. Somewhere between polished boardrooms and quiet diners, the path to his son's recovery had begun to reveal itself, drawn not in medical charts, but in the subtle curve of a woman's touch, and the courage hidden behind her calm green eyes. The next morning dawned silver and cold over the city skyline, but inside Adrian's office the air felt heavier than the fog outside. He sat behind the broad mahogany desk that had witnessed decades of negotiations and victories. Yet today, he could not focus on contracts or reports. His thoughts kept circling back to Juniper Diner, to the woman with calm green eyes who had guided his son's trembling hands with effortless precision. Noah's laughter still echoed in his mind, bright and unguarded, a sound Adrian had almost forgotten. He had spent years chasing experts, signing blank checks for treatments that promised progress and delivered disappointment. But in one simple lunch, a stranger had offered something more valuable than data: hope. By midday, Adrian found himself driving back to the diner without planning it. The sign over the door flickered softly, its worn letters glowing like an invitation. Inside, the morning rush had faded. Lila stood near the counter, refilling sugar jars with the same deliberate care she gave every movement. She looked up as the bell chimed, and her eyes widened slightly before settling into calm professionalism. "Mr. Kincaid, back so soon?" Her voice was warm but measured. Adrian approached the counter, choosing his words carefully. "You helped my son yesterday, more than anyone else has in years. I need to understand how." She set the jar down and folded her hands, the gesture precise, almost ceremonial. "Noah is a remarkable child. Sometimes the body just needs the right cue to remember what it's capable of. You speak like a therapist, not a waitress." The corner of her mouth lifted in a faint smile. "Titles do not define what we can offer." Adrian leaned closer, lowering his voice. "My son has a rare neurological disorder. Specialists from 3 countries have failed. But yesterday, he improved. I don't know who you are, Lila, or what your story is, but I'm asking for your help." For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes drifted to the window where sunlight fell across the floor in shifting squares. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of someone who had built walls to survive. "If I agree, there will be rules. Name them. First, this must be done properly, not as a favor from a kind stranger. I need access to Noah's full medical history, coordination with his current physicians, and the freedom to design a treatment plan without interference." Adrian nodded immediately. "Done. Second, we meet somewhere neutral. Not your home, not the hospital. A place where Noah can feel safe, not studied. There is a community center near here with a small therapy studio. I'll rent the space." He agreed again, already calculating logistics, but sensing these boundaries mattered more than convenience. Lila hesitated before the third condition, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. "My past is not up for discussion. You may wonder, but you will not ask. What matters is what I can do for Noah now." Adrian studied her, searching for cracks in the calm facade. Beneath the composure, he saw the flicker of something: loss, maybe guilt, maybe fear. But he also saw conviction, the steady light of someone who had walked through fire and refused to vanish. "If these are the terms, I accept them." Lila released a slow breath, as if bracing herself for consequences. "We begin Saturday morning. Bring Noah at 9. As Adrian turned to leave, he glanced back. She was already moving again, gathering dishes, restoring order to the quiet diner. Yet every motion carried new gravity now. Behind the apron stood a woman holding the keys to a miracle, bound by secrets she could not share. Driving away, Adrian felt the first stirrings of something unfamiliar, trust without proof. He had spent his life demanding evidence, measuring success in numbers. But this time, he chose to believe in instinct, in the quiet certainty that some answers could not be bought or quantified. That evening, Noah asked if they could see the lady with the magic hands again. Adrian smiled, smoothing his son's hair. "Saturday," he said, "she's going to help us try something new." In the dim light of his study later, he reviewed Noah's files, rows of charts and sterile notes that chronicled failure after failure. For the first time, the documents felt less like a record and more like a challenge. Maybe the solution had been waiting beyond laboratories and titles all along. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the glass like distant stars. Adrian closed the folders and whispered into the quiet room. 3 conditions, 3 chances to rewrite what fate had declared impossible. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of pale glass, clouds drifting like slow thoughts across the horizon. Adrian guided Noah through the doors of the community center, a modest brick building surrounded by whispering maples. Inside, sunlight pooled across the wooden floor of a quiet studio where mats and small therapy tools were neatly arranged in careful symmetry. The air smelled faintly of lavender and fresh polish, a sanctuary away from hospitals and fluorescent lights. Lila Monroe was already there, dressed simply in a soft gray sweater and black slacks. She greeted Noah first, kneeling to meet his eyes, her expression calm and encouraging. "Good morning, champion. Ready for a little adventure?" Noah nodded eagerly, clutching his crutches but standing taller than usual, his face bright with anticipation. Adrian stood at the edge of the room, trying not to intrude. He watched as Lila placed colorful blocks in a loose circle on the mat. "We're going to play a game," she said. "Every time you reach a block, you tell me something you like. No pressure, just stories and steps." Noah's eyes widened. "That's it. That's the game?" Lila smiled. "That's it. But here's the secret. Every story helps your muscles remember how to work together." She demonstrated the first move, a smooth transfer of weight from one leg to the other, almost like a dance. Then she guided Noah's hands, adjusting the angle of his crutches, showing him how to let his shoulders lead instead of his arms. With each motion, her voice remained steady, blending instruction with praise. At first, Noah wobbled, his breath catching with effort. Adrian took an instinctive step forward, but Lila raised one hand gently, signaling patience. She knelt beside the boy, her tone soft. "Feel the floor, Noah. It's strong enough to hold you. Now trust your leg to follow." Something shifted. Noah took a careful step, then another, the rhythm awkward but determined. When he reached the first block, he grinned. "I like pancakes." Adrian exhaled slowly, a quiet laugh breaking through his tension. They continued, one block at a time, each answer a small victory. "I like space rockets. I like dogs. I like the way rain sounds on the roof." By the 4th circle, Noah's steps had grown more confident, his body finding a balance that had always seemed just beyond reach. Adrian felt a strange ache behind his ribs, a mix of pride and wonder. He had seen countless sessions before, each rigid and clinical. But this felt different, alive, almost sacred. Lila was not simply guiding muscles, she was awakening memory, teaching Noah to believe in his own body again. After 30 minutes, she paused the exercise and handed Noah a small foam ball. "Let's see your throw," she said. Noah frowned in concentration, adjusted his stance as she had shown him, and sent the ball sailing across the mat. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady. He looked up, astonished. "I did it." "You did," Lila replied softly, "because you remembered what strength feels like." Adrian's throat tightened. The improvement was subtle, yet unmistakable. He could see the alignment in Noah's posture, the way each breath seemed freer, lighter. It was as if invisible chains had begun to loosen. Lila ended the session with quiet stretches, guiding Noah's movements with a tenderness that felt both professional and deeply human. She spoke little, allowing silence to carry the weight of progress. When Noah finally sat back on the mat, Flushed and smiling, she handed him a small notebook. "This is your story journal. Every time we meet, you'll add a drawing or a word about what your body learned that day." Noah flipped through the blank pages, eyes wide with pride. "Can I write pancakes first?" Lila laughed gently. "Pancakes are always a good beginning." As they prepared to leave, Adrian approached her. "I've never seen him respond like that. What did you do differently?" She wiped her hands on a cloth, her expression thoughtful. "The body remembers more than we think. Sometimes it just needs the right story to remind it how to move." He wanted to ask more, to press for explanations, but her calm certainty left little room for interrogation. She glanced at Noah, who was humming softly, tracing circles on the cover of his new journal. "Keep letting him believe," she said. "Belief is the first muscle we have to rebuild." Outside, the air was crisp and full of promise. Adrian lifted Noah into the car, feeling the weight of his son's joy settle against his chest like a quiet miracle. For the first time in years, the road ahead did not feel endless. It felt possible. By Monday morning, the steady rhythm of progress had woven itself into Adrian's thoughts like a fragile melody. The weekend replayed in flashes, Noah's laughter, the sure steps across the mat, Lila's calm voice guiding every movement. For the first time in years, he felt anchored by hope rather than weighed down by failure. But as sunlight poured across his desk inside Kincaid Tower, a new message blinked on his monitor, its subject line stark and cold. Regarding Lila Hart. He hesitated before opening it, the name struck with unexpected force. Hart, not Monroe. A different identity hiding beneath the surface. The body of the message was short, precise, and laced with accusation. Ask her about the Alvarez case. Ask her about the child who never walked again. Attached were two documents, a disciplinary notice from a medical board and a newspaper clipping from 3 years ago. The headline spoke of negligence, a therapy error that left a 7-year-old girl paralyzed. The article named the responsible practitioner, Dr. Lila Hart, specialist in neurorehabilitation. Adrian read the lines twice, each word slicing through the fragile trust he had begun to build. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, searching for explanations that did not come. Could this be the same woman who had taught Noah to find balance, who carried such grace in every gesture? A knock at the door startled him. Ava Chen stepped in with a folder, pausing at the tension on his face. "Sir, is everything all right?" Adrian closed the email with a click, the screen going dark. "Just numbers," he said quietly. "Go ahead with the Zurich briefing. I'll join later." When she left, silence filled the room like a weight. Adrian opened the email again, scanning every detail. Dates aligned. Qualifications matched. There was no mistake. The woman guiding his son carried a past marked by tragedy. He spent the afternoon in restless motion, pacing the length of his office as city lights flickered to life beyond the glass. Logic urged caution. Trust demanded patience. Yet, fear whispered louder. What if the story was true? What if Noah's newfound progress was built on borrowed faith, destined to crumble? At dusk, he drove without destination, streets blurring beneath headlights until he found himself near the diner. The windows glowed softly, silhouettes moving behind the counter. Lila was there, her posture straight, her hair gathered neatly, the picture of quiet resolve. For a moment he considered stepping inside, confronting her, demanding truth. But the memory of Noah's joy held him back. He returned home to find his son at the kitchen table, sketching in the small journal Lila had given him. "Look, Dad," he said proudly, showing a page filled with uneven lines forming a stick figure standing tall beside a set of crutches lying on the ground. "That's me, walking by myself someday." Adrian's chest tightened. He knelt beside his son, brushing a hand through his hair. "That's a good dream, Noah. Keep it close." Later, long after Noah had fallen asleep, Adrian sat in the dark living room, the glow of his phone illuminating the email once more. He searched for the Alvarez case, reading reports buried in medical archives. The details were grim: a routine therapy session, a sudden reaction, irreversible damage. Testimony suggested a dosage error, conflicting instructions, a team divided. The blame had fallen on the attending specialist. He found a single line buried in a follow-up article. Records under review, potential tampering suspected, no resolution reported. The words tangled in his mind, half accusation, half doubt. If tampering was suspected, perhaps she had been framed. But if not, could he risk Noah's safety for compassion? Near midnight, he composed a message but stopped before sending it. Questions crowded his thoughts, but none carried answers he could trust. When morning came, fatigue weighed heavy, but decision replaced hesitation. He would call her, ask directly, strip away shadows. Truth, whatever it was, had to stand in the open. As the sun rose, casting long bars of light across the floor, he pressed her number. The line rang once, twice, then connected. Her voice came through, calm and unguarded. "Adrian, is everything all right?" He hesitated only a breath. "We need to talk, Lila, about who you really are." Silence followed, deep and steady. Then she spoke softly, the weight of old pain threaded through her words. I wondered how long it would take. He closed his eyes, feeling the fragile harmony of their fragile miracle tremble. The truth was coming, and with it, the storm that would decide whether faith could survive the shadows of the past. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Adrian's office, glinting off polished glass and chrome, but its warmth did nothing to ease the cold inside his chest. He stood by the window, with the phone pressed to his ear, listening to the quiet breath on the other end. Lila's voice was calm, almost resigned. "You found it, didn't you? The Alvarez case." Adrian's grip tightened. "You lied to me. You let me bring my son to you without telling me what happened." "I didn't lie," she said softly. "I told you my past was not up for discussion. You agreed. That was before I learned a child in your care was left paralyzed." His words cracked like ice. "How am I supposed to trust you with Noah now?" Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a quiet ache. "That child's name was Maya. I still see her face every time I close my eyes." "I didn't harm her, Adrian. I tried to save her. Someone changed the dosage after I signed the chart. I took the blame because the hospital wanted the scandal buried. Do you have proof? Not enough. Not then. Maybe not ever. But truth doesn't disappear just because no one listens." Adrian turned away from the window, pacing the length of the room. "I can't risk Noah. You understand that?" "Yes," she whispered. "I would never ask you to." He wanted to believe her, wanted to hold on to the fragile hope she'd given his son. But the image of that headline burned in his mind. He closed his eyes, forcing the words past the lump in his throat. "We're done, Lila. I can't see you again." The line went still, then a quiet reply, steady as a heartbeat. "Take care of him. And of yourself." The call ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Adrian lowered the phone and stared at the city beyond the glass. Cars crawled along the streets like tiny veins pulsing with indifferent life. Somewhere out there, truth and lies twisted together until they were impossible to separate. That evening, he sat beside Noah at the dinner table, watching his son trace circles in his journal with a colored pencil. When Noah asked if they were seeing Lila tomorrow, Adrian forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Not anymore, buddy. Why? She has other things to take care of." Noah frowned but said nothing. After a long pause, he turned the page and drew another picture. This one of himself standing still, the crutches leaning against a wall far away. Later, when the house was quiet, Adrian poured a glass of whiskey and sat in the dim light of his study. The weight of his decision pressed like iron against his chest. He had built his empire by trusting evidence, by cutting away uncertainty before it could rot into failure. But this choice didn't feel like victory. It felt like breaking something fragile that might never heal. In a small apartment across town, Lila sat on the edge of her narrow bed, her phone still glowing with the remnants of their conversation. Her hands trembled, memories spilling through her like shards of glass. The sterile hospital room, the flashing monitors, the girl's still face, the signatures on the form that carried her name but not her hand. She had rebuilt her life from the rubble, piece by piece, and now it was unraveling again. She pressed her palms together, whispering a prayer into the empty room. Not for herself, but for the boy who had trusted her, for the father who could not. Days passed in slow silence. Without Lila's sessions, Noah's progress faltered. He still practiced, still smiled, but the spark had dimmed. Adrian saw it in every hesitant step. At night he replayed the moments in the studio, the way she had guided Noah's movements like a conductor leading a symphony, each gesture filled with quiet certainty. He told himself he had done the right thing. Yet every time Noah asked when she would come back, the answer tasted like regret. One evening, as the boy slept, Adrian stood at the doorway of his room, watching the slow rise and fall of his small chest. Beyond the window, the city shimmered in restless light. In his mind, a single thought echoed with relentless clarity. Hope had entered their lives through a stranger's hands, and he had closed the door on it. Outside, a distant siren wailed through the night, fading into silence. Adrian turned away, the sound lingering like a question he could not yet answer. 3 days passed beneath a sky the color of smoke, and, with each sunrise, the silence in Adrian's house grew heavier. Noah practiced alone in the living room, the echo of his crutches tapping out a rhythm that once sounded like progress, but now carried a hollow edge. He tried to smile, tried to show his father that everything was fine, but Adrian could see the hesitation in every step, the falter that hadn't been there before. At night, Adrian lay awake listening to the soft clatter of the crutches against the hallway floor, a sound that had once brought hope but now whispered failure. Lila's absence hung in every room, invisible yet undeniable. He told himself he had made the right choice, that a man responsible for an empire could not gamble with uncertainty. But doubt had already planted its roots deep within him. On the 4th morning, he drove Noah to his regular physician at the medical center, Dr. Bennett Rowan. The doctor reviewed the boy's condition, flipping through pages of charts with careful precision. After a long pause, he looked up. "I don't know what you changed recently, but his muscle response was improving last week. Now it's static again." Adrian shifted in his chair. "We stopped working with a private therapist. It seemed necessary." Rowan studied him for a moment, his brow furrowed. Whoever she was, her methods were working. "I'd advise reconsidering." The words followed Adrian out of the office like a whisper he couldn't silence. He spent the afternoon buried in meetings, but his focus fractured again and again. The faces around the boardroom blurred into meaningless shapes while his mind drifted back to the studio, to Lila's steady voice and the way Noah had stood taller under her guidance. That evening, while reviewing quarterly reports, his phone buzzed with a reminder from the therapy journal app he had installed for Noah. He opened it absent-mindedly and froze. A new entry had been added automatically from a synced sensor in Noah's brace. The data showed improved stability scores from last week's sessions with Lila, numbers higher than anything recorded before. Even the system seemed to echo what his heart already knew. Adrian rose from his desk and paced the length of his office, torn between reason and instinct. Logic demanded distance. Evidence whispered otherwise. Somewhere beyond the polished walls, a truth waited, buried beneath accusations and silence. Unable to resist, he opened his laptop and began searching. The Alvarez case surfaced again, but this time he dug deeper, tracing threads through archived reports and medical board statements. In one obscure record, he found a line that unsettled him. Dosage logs missing, unauthorized access recorded, investigation closed without resolution. He leaned back, staring at the screen. If Lila had been framed, if the error was never hers, then he had turned away the only person capable of helping his son. That night, he sat at Noah's bedside as the boy slept, the faint rise and fall of his chest steady beneath the moonlight. A small drawing lay beside him in the open journal, a woman with green eyes kneeling next to a boy who stood without crutches. Beneath the picture, written in shaky letters, were 3 words: "She believes in me." Adrian closed the book gently, guilt pressing against his ribs like a blade. He rose and walked to the window, staring out at the glittering skyline. Somewhere in that vast city, Lila was alone, carrying the weight of a past she could not escape. He had judged her without proof, And now the evidence began to tell a different story. The next morning, he called his assistant. "Ava, I need a private investigator. Someone discreet, experienced with medical cases." She hesitated. "What should I tell them to look for?" He answered quietly. "The truth about a woman named Lila Hart." By afternoon, a name arrived in his inbox. Elias Ward. Former law enforcement, reputation for precision, a man who believed facts were sacred. Adrian dialed the number without hesitation. "I need you to verify a case from 3 years ago. Alvarez, pediatric rehabilitation. I want every record, every witness, every missing page." Ward's voice was steady. "Give me 48 hours." As the call ended, Adrian felt the faintest flicker of resolve stir within him. He had built his empire on uncovering hidden flaws, on never accepting surface appearances. He would do the same now, not for profit, but for his son, for the truth, and perhaps for the woman whose quiet strength still haunted his thoughts. Outside, the city lights began to shimmer against the darkening sky, and for the first time since the email arrived, hope flickered again, fragile, but alive. The rain began before dawn, whispering against the glass walls of Kincaid Tower like a secret waiting to be told. Adrian sat alone in his office, the city blurred beyond the window, watching headlights smear into gold streaks along the streets below. He had spent most of the night replaying fragments of memory, Noah's confident steps, Lila's calm hands, the tremor in her voice when she spoke of the past. Now there was no room left for hesitation. Truth would either vindicate her or condemn her, and he needed to know which. Elias Ward arrived promptly at 7, a tall man with a weathered face and eyes sharpened by years of seeing too much. He carried no laptop, only a slim folder and a small recorder. "I've reviewed what you sent," he said, taking the seat across from Adrian. "The Alvarez case is messy, sealed files, incomplete testimony, a closed inquiry that smells like a cover-up." Adrian leaned forward. "Tell me what you found so far." Ward opened the folder, revealing photocopies of reports stamped confidential. The hospital's internal logs show irregularities in medication records. One of the vials used during the session was logged under the wrong batch number. Surveillance cameras in the storage wing were offline that day. And there's more. 3 staff members resigned immediately after the incident, all with ties to the pharmaceutical vendor. Adrian felt a pulse quicken at his temple. So the error might not have been hers. Ward nodded slowly. "It's possible she was the scapegoat. The board needed a face for the press, and she was the attending physician. The investigation never reached the vendor or the supervising director. Can we prove it? Not yet, but there's a lead. The girl's mother gave a statement months later claiming she was pressured to withdraw complaints in exchange for a settlement. I've tracked her to a suburb outside the city. She might still have the original therapy notes." Adrian stared at the papers, anger rising with every missing signature, every redacted line. All these years, Lila had carried this blame alone, while those responsible vanished into silence. Ward slid a final page across the desk, a patent registration for a neuromuscular therapy protocol filed 6 months after the incident. The listed inventor was not Lila Hart, but Dr. Celeste Marlowe, the supervising director at the time. The design matched the same exercises Lila had used with Noah. "She stole her work," Adrian said under his breath. "It looks that way. If Hart's notes were seized during the investigation, Marlowe could have repurposed them." Adrian rose from his chair and paced to the window, the rain now falling harder, streaking the glass like ink. Pieces began to align: Lila's exile from medicine, her refusal to speak of the past, the quiet precision with which she practiced. She had not been hiding guilt, she had been surviving betrayal. "How soon can we confirm all this?" Ward checked his watch. "Give me another day. I'll speak with the mother and pull the vendor's old shipping logs. If there's evidence, we'll find it." When the investigator left, Adrian remained by the window, his reflection fractured in the shifting light. Shame pressed against his ribs. He had demanded honesty from everyone around him, yet when faced with someone's deepest wound, he had turned away. That afternoon, between meetings and calls, he found himself opening Noah's journal again. The most recent entry was a simple drawing, a pair of hands holding up a small figure walking forward. Beneath it, a single word: trust. By evening, Ward called back. "I met the mother. She kept a recording from a settlement meeting. The company rep mentioned dosage tampering and promised compensation if she stayed silent. She'll release it if subpoenaed." Adrian's breath caught. That's the proof. It's a start, enough to reopen the case and clear Hart's record. As he ended the call, the weight in Adrian's chest shifted from doubt to determination. He had wronged a woman who deserved faith, and now he would set it right. The following morning, he contacted the hospital board and requested an emergency review, forwarding the evidence Ward had gathered. His name alone was enough to summon attention. By noon, a formal inquiry was underway, and Dr. Celeste Marlowe's spotless reputation began to crack under scrutiny. That night, as the city lights shimmered through thinning clouds, Adrian sat in his darkened study and whispered into the quiet, "Hold on, Lila. The truth is coming." The boardroom of Kincaid Medical Center had never felt so suffocating. Morning light streamed through the tall glass windows, slicing across polished mahogany, and the anxious faces gathered around the long table. The air carried a brittle tension, the kind that settled before a storm. Adrian stood at the head of the room, documents spread before him, his jaw set with a resolve sharpened by sleepless nights. Across from him sat Dr. Celeste Marlowe, immaculate in a dark suit, her expression calm but wary, eyes flickering with calculation. Members of the hospital board shifted in their seats as Elias Ward arranged his evidence in careful order. A recorder clicked on, capturing every breath. Adrian began with a steady voice that masked the fury coiled beneath. "We are here to revisit the Alvarez case. New evidence has surfaced. It appears the initial investigation was incomplete, intentionally so." Marlowe tilted her chin, her tone smooth. "That case was closed years ago. Tragic, yes, but hardly relevant now." Adrian met her gaze without blinking. "It's relevant when an innocent physician was destroyed to protect others." He turned to Ward. "Show them." The investigator placed a series of photographs on the table, scanned dosage logs, shipping manifests, and a time-stamped access report. "This entry," he said, pointing to a blurred signature, "does not match Dr. Hart's handwriting. It matches a staff member under Marlowe's supervision." Surveillance cameras in the supply wing were offline that day, but access logs show unauthorized entry 30 minutes before the session began. A murmur rippled through the board. Marlowe's composure wavered for a heartbeat before returning. "Circumstantial," she said coolly. Ward pressed play on the recorder. A woman's voice filled the room, trembling yet clear. The mother of Maya Alvarez, recounting how she had been pressured into silence with promises of settlement. She mentioned a company representative tied to the same vendor Marlowe had approved. The room grew still. Adrian stepped forward, his voice low but unyielding. "You built your career on research you didn't create. You buried the one person who could challenge your claim." Marlowe's mask cracked, anger flashing behind her eyes. She rose abruptly. "You have no idea what it takes to keep a hospital running, to maintain funding, to secure innovation. Mistakes happen. Someone had to take responsibility." "Lila Hart was not a mistake," Adrian said. "She was a healer, and you stole from her." The board chair cleared his throat, his voice tight. "Dr. Marlowe, these allegations are serious. Until a full review is complete, your privileges are suspended." Marlowe's lips parted, a protest forming, but the weight of the evidence silenced her. She gathered her papers with shaking hands, the illusion of control slipping as she turned and strode from the room. When the doors closed behind her, a long breath released from the assembled members. Adrian remained standing, the fury draining into exhaustion. Ward began collecting the documents, his tone measured. "The review will clear Hart's record. It may take time, but the truth is now official." Adrian nodded, but victory felt hollow. Clearing her name would not erase the years she had lived under shame, the exile she had endured. He thought of her quiet strength, the way she carried sorrow like a hidden scar, and guilt tightened around his heart. That evening, he drove through the city until he reached the small apartment where Lila lived. The building was old, its bricks darkened by rain, a single light glowing behind her window. He hesitated at the door before knocking once. When she opened it, surprise flickered across her face, followed by guarded calm. Adrian stood in the hallway, rain clinging to his coat, eyes heavy with remorse. "It's over," he said softly. "The truth came out. You've been cleared." She blinked, silent, as if the words were a language she hadn't spoken in years. Cleared. Marlowe confessed nothing, but the evidence was enough. "The board will reinstate your license." Her hands trembled at her sides. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she turned slightly, as though steadying herself against the wall. "Thank you, Adrian, but clearing my name doesn't erase what's gone." He stepped closer, voice breaking. "I should have trusted you. I let fear speak louder than faith." She met his gaze, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're not the only one who's been afraid, but maybe now we can stop running from the past." Outside, the rain eased into silence. In that quiet doorway, the weight of years began to lift. Not fully, not yet, but enough for a breath of hope to enter. The following morning dawned clear and pale, the rain-washed streets glimmering under a fragile sunlight. Adrian stood outside Lila's apartment building with a bouquet of white lilies in his hand, unsure if flowers could carry the weight of what words had broken. He had spent the night awake, replaying every moment of doubt, every silence he had chosen over trust. Now there was only one thing left to do. Lila answered the door, still wearing the calm poise that had once disarmed him, but there was a new gentleness in her eyes, a quiet exhaustion from years of holding her own defense. Adrian held the bouquet awkwardly. "I don't know if this can mean anything," he began, "but I needed to come." She stepped aside and let him in. The apartment was small but bright, sunlight catching on the scattered papers across her table, research notes, therapy diagrams, and a folder bearing her reinstatement letter. He set the flowers on the counter and turned to face her. "I'm sorry, Lila. Sorry that I doubted you when I should have stood beside you. You gave my son hope, and I repaid you with suspicion." Her eyes softened, though her expression stayed guarded. "You were a father trying to protect his child. I can't fault you for that." "No," Adrian said quietly. "I was a man too accustomed to control, too afraid to believe in something I couldn't measure. You told me not to ask about your past, and I should have respected that trust. Instead, I let fear decide." She folded her arms loosely, considering him. "For a long time I thought the truth didn't matter anymore, that no one would listen. But you did. Only after I broke what we had," he admitted. "Only after I realized that without you, Noah's progress stopped. He needs you." "We both do." Lila looked down at her hands, tracing the faint scars across her palms. "I once believed healing meant fixing what was broken," she said. "But sometimes healing means forgiving the ones who hurt us, even when they meant no harm." Adrian stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking until he could see the shimmer of emotion in her eyes. "Then, forgive me," he whispered. "Not because I deserve it, but because I want to build something true this time." For a moment, silence filled the room, soft as breath. Then she nodded slowly. "Forgiveness isn't a gift you ask for. It's something earned. But this is a start." He exhaled, relief and gratitude mingling like sunlight breaking through clouds. "There's one more thing," he said. "The board wants to reinstate your license immediately, and they've offered you the lead position in a new pediatric program. I told them I'd fund it myself if I had to." She blinked, astonished. "You did that? It's the least I can do." "You deserve the chance to practice again, to teach others what true care looks like." Her lips curved into a small, tremulous smile. "For years I dreamed of hearing those words. I thought the door was closed forever." "Doors can be reopened," Adrian said softly, "if we have the courage to knock again." Lila glanced toward the window where sunlight spilled across the floor, and for the first time in years, her shoulders seemed to ease under the weight she had carried alone. Later that day, they visited the community studio together. Noah waited by the mat, his face lighting up when he saw her. "You came back." Lila knelt beside him, her voice bright with affection. "Of course I did. We have stories left to write, don't we?" Adrian watched as Noah took his first steps toward her without hesitation, the rhythm of his crutches steady, purposeful. For the first time in months, joy bloomed across the boy's face. When the session ended, Noah ran his fingers over the pages of his journal, adding a new line in careful letters. "Today I walked with hope again." Adrian stood in the doorway, heart full. He looked at Lila, who met his gaze with quiet understanding. They had both been broken in different ways, yet somehow, through pain and truth, they had found a path back. As the sun dipped low over the city, its golden light stretched across the studio floor, casting 3 long shadows that moved together: father, healer, child, each step carrying the promise of something whole. 2 days later, Adrian sat in his office, surrounded by walls of glass that reflected the city skyline. Yet all the gleam and prestige felt hollow. The truth had freed him, but it also demanded something more. A reckoning with the forces that had nearly destroyed Lila's life. On his desk lay a stack of documents his investigator had delivered that morning. Suppressed evidence, falsified reports, and financial trails pointing to the conspiracy that had buried her career. He stared at the signatures, the grants awarded to those who stole her research, the hidden transactions that whispered of greed cloaked in white coats. Rage stirred, but beneath it, a fierce clarity burned brighter. This wasn't just about redemption, it was about justice. That evening, Adrian met his investigator, Daniel Cross, in a quiet corner of a private club. The low light glimmered off the mahogany table as Daniel laid out his findings. "It's all here," Daniel said grimly. Dr. Patricia Hensley orchestrated the entire cover-up. She falsified the test results, administered the conflicting medication, and shifted the blame when the child's condition worsened. Adrian clenched his fists. "And the board?" "Complicit," Daniel confirmed. They used the scandal to seize Lila's research, filed patents in their own names, and sold the rights to a pharmaceutical company within weeks of her trial. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then we bring everything into the light." That night, he prepared a dossier with meticulous precision, assembling every shred of proof, emails, transcripts, witness statements. He wrote a statement for the press, not as a businessman, but as a father and a man who had seen the cost of silence. The next morning, headlines blazed across national media. "Medical conspiracy exposed. Falsified evidence leads to wrongful revocation of doctor's license." Adrian stood beside Lila at the press conference, cameras flashing as journalists crowded forward. She looked calm, poised, but her eyes shimmered with the weight of 3 lost years. "I never sought revenge," she began softly, her voice carrying through the room. "I only wanted to help children who had been told there was no hope. The truth matters, not for my reputation, but for every patient who trusts their doctor to fight for them with integrity." Her words struck like a quiet bell, resonating beyond scandal or vindication. Adrian watched her, pride swelling as she faced the world not as a disgraced physician, but as the woman she had always been. Brilliant, compassionate, unbreakable. Questions flew, cameras clicked, and as the crowd dispersed, Lila turned to Adrian. "You didn't have to do all this," she murmured. "Yes, I did," he said. "You taught me that healing requires truth. This was the only way forward for all of us." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Adrian and Lila met Daniel in the boardroom of Sinclair Medical Center. The walls that had once echoed with sterile ambition now felt charged with purpose. Daniel placed one final folder on the table. "Dr. Hensley's arrest warrant has been issued. She's being held pending federal investigation. The patents are being retracted. Lila, your license reinstatement is officially confirmed." Lila's breath caught. For a long moment she said nothing, tracing the embossed seal on the document with trembling fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Adrian replied softly. "Thank you for not giving up." The next morning, the hospital where Lila once trained issued a public apology, acknowledging the injustice done. Messages poured in from former colleagues, patients, and families she had helped. Letters filled with gratitude and welcome. That evening, Adrian invited her to the rooftop of the medical center. City lights shimmered below, the same skyline that had once witnessed his helplessness, now shining with possibility. "You changed more than my son's life," he said quietly. "You changed mine." Lila smiled, eyes glistening with tears that were no longer bitter. "Maybe we both needed to be broken first, so we could rebuild something honest." Below them, the city pulsed with life, unaware that on this rooftop, two people were rewriting a story once marked by loss into one defined by courage and trust. In the silence that followed, Adrian reached for her hand. Together, they looked toward the horizon, no longer bound by the past, but ready to shape a future where truth would always stand at the center. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel shimmered with golden light. Chandeliers sparkled above rows of elegantly dressed guests gathered to celebrate the relaunch of the Pediatric Neurotherapy Institute under the guidance of Dr. Lila Carter. At the center of the room stood Lila herself, radiant in a navy gown, her reinstated medical license framed beside a banner that read, "Restoring Hope, Rebuilding Futures." Adrian watched her from across the room, pride swelling in his chest. He had seen her rise from the ashes of betrayal and doubt to reclaim not only her career, but her purpose. Around them, journalists whispered about the miracle doctor and the CEO who had fought to clear her name. But Adrian cared only for the quiet strength in her eyes and the laughter she shared with Noah as he showed off his latest school project to anyone who would listen. When the speeches ended, Adrian took the stage. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady and warm. "Tonight isn't just a celebration of medicine or justice. It's a celebration of courage, the kind that refuses to die even when the world turns away." He turned toward Lila, their eyes locking across the crowd. "This institute stands as proof that truth can be buried but never destroyed. And for every child who walks again, for every family who finds hope, we owe that to one extraordinary woman." The applause rose like a wave. Lila's cheeks flushed as Adrian descended from the stage and offered his hand. He led her to the center of the floor, and as music swelled, they began to dance. The crowd faded into a blur, the light soft and golden around them. "You've rebuilt everything," Adrian whispered. "No," Lila replied softly. "We rebuilt it together." He smiled, drawing her closer. Noah stood at the edge of the dance floor, his crutches long retired, clapping in rhythm. His laughter carried across the room like a promise fulfilled. Later that night, the three of them stepped out onto the hotel terrace. The city stretched before them, alive with motion and light. Noah leaned against the railing, pointing to the stars. "That one's ours," he declared with the certainty only a child could possess. "The brightest one." Lila knelt beside him, following his gaze. "Maybe you're right. It feels like it's watching over us." Adrian wrapped an arm around them both. "It's a good night for wishes," he said quietly. Noah grinned. "I already got mine." In that moment, Lila felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The shadows of the past had finally loosened their hold. The institute would open its doors the following week, welcoming children from across the country, offering therapies inspired by the techniques she had once been punished for developing. Now, they were recognized as groundbreaking. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the glass atrium of the new institute. Lila walked through the halls, greeting staff and young patients with a calm, confident smile. She paused at a mural depicting a tree with roots labeled truth, compassion, resilience, and branches reaching upward toward hope. Adrian and Noah joined her, each placing a hand against the painted trunk. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Adrian nodded. "It's what you've built." Together, they stepped into the first therapy room where a group of children laughed as they practiced exercises disguised as games. One girl lifted her arm higher than she ever had before, her mother's eyes filling with tears. Lila knelt beside the child, guiding her movement with gentle precision. "That's it," she encouraged. "You're stronger than you think." Watching her, Adrian realized the true miracle wasn't in the treatments or the restored career, but in the way Lila transformed every space she entered. She carried light into places that had known only despair. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of them walked home together through the quiet streets. Noah skipped ahead, humming softly, his footsteps steady and sure. Lila glanced at Adrian, her hand brushing his. "Thank you for believing in me," she said. He shook his head gently. "Thank you for teaching me what belief really means." At their doorstep, Noah turned and reached for both their hands. "Can we watch the stars again tonight?" Lila smiled. "Always." As they stood together beneath the darkening sky, the brightest star flickered above them, a silent witness to everything they had lost and everything they had found. In its glow, the past no longer hurt. The future waited, wide and full of promise, a new beginning forged from faith, love, and the courage to begin again.